With the establishment of that large steppe empire where the Mongols are controlling the trade routes, the Silk Road, all the way from the Far East, all the way through most of South and Central Asia to the edge of the Black Sea and the edge of the Russian states like Muscovy and Novgorod, the Mongols, remember, had been very interested in sponsoring trade or protecting trade and traders. This is going to be the famous Silk Road that we're talking about, and of course, the legends of Marco Polo and others will be deeply involved, and we'll get back to that soon. But one of the first things to notice here is that now that the Mongols have created this large empire and connected it through their ability to control the trade routes, we're going to have an issue with disease. Right. There is within Central Asia a disease. It is a bacteria. It is living mostly in the gut of small fleas who tend to use rats as their hosts. All right? This is then endemic, meaning it is just part of a certain space in biology, but increasingly the Chinese population had expanded into Central Asia and by the 14th century come into contact and increasingly spread this disease back and forth. Now, humans are not the preferred host, but nonetheless they will be susceptible to this disease, especially those who are malnourished. Now, there are many forms of this plague. We're going to be calling it the Black Death. We're going to be calling it also the bubonic plague. It can be spread by blood-to-blood contact, between humans. It can be spread by coughing and droplets through the air. It can be spread by, of course, the flea biting the human and having some of the bacteria transferred into the bloodstream. The thing that's going to be bewildering about the Black Death for many Europeans is that it is so variable. It seems to come on so quickly that they can't, in their scientific understanding, comprehend how or why it is happening, and there will be multiple reactions of why it had happened. We do know that it had been devastating to many places in China in the time period right before it gets to Europe. Some legacy understandings that in some areas of the Chinese Empire, the die-off rate, the death rate of humans was in excess of 70% in some regions. It followed the traders all the way across Asia, and we can almost sort of take a look and show the dots where it appears in the historical record across Asia, and it finally is going to get into Italy when it comes to the ports of Sicily and some other places. Okay? This is an artistic depiction from the city of Tournai, which is in modern-day Belgium. It is a depiction of the death rate. That the death rate of humans is so high, it comes on so fast, that there are mass burial pits in many places in Europe as they just could not keep up with the death rate. We have always been looking at historical records to try and figure out, in terms of the death rate, was it 25%? Was it 50%? And we have variable records from churches, from family histories, genealogies, commentary by many people in Europe at the time. What we do know is that the death rate is someplace between 25 and 50%, but it was highly variable by region. It depended on a lot of scenarios, but once it is in Europe by the latter part of 1347, we're going to have an understanding of how and why, and the Europeans will struggle with that. The variable death rates. There are some places, for example, in Europe, some places in Poland, a few places in the mountains in the south of France, on the edge of the border with what you know as modern-day Spain, where there seems to be very little impact of the plague, that the die-off is not significant. But there's other places, for example, some of the major Italian city-states where the death rate is colossal, someplace in the area of 60% or more. So that bewildering thing for Europeans was in many ways to think about how they could make sense of it, all right? So the confusion for all of us in history is how many people? But we do know there's some other ramifications of the plague. It was influenced by the cycles of the year, because many of the trade activities of humans carrying themselves and their goods back and forth during the summer. Also, some of the availability of grain and other things for some of the rodents, if there's going to be a rodent spread aspect of it. The cold and flu season. The sheer inability of humans to see that this as just like one kind of disease at one point in time that's predictable. There were people who got the plague who lived. There's others who got the plague and died within a day. That bewildered people, and they tried to find a way to explain it. Many people in Europe will turn to a form of anti-Semitism. They'll think in terms of blaming, scapegoating somebody. And in many European communities, anybody who was the other was in many ways suspect. In many European cities, especially in the Rhineland, the area of the Rhine River, there are significant Jewish communities living in those cities under the protection of, many times, local churchmen and other authorities. Many people looking for a scapegoat will go after the Jewish community and attack them very quickly and blame them. Others will take a look at the sun, the moon, and the stars, and they'll think in terms of astrology. They'll think that that was the cause. Others will take a look at things like understanding that foul gases come out of volcanoes and have a theory that essentially the earth passed gas and that the gas was so toxic it spread the plague. The scientific, medical, and other communities are unable to comprehend the details of the plague. What you want to take away from it is that it is a force that will take out a massive number of people in Europe. It will influence the tax base, settlement patterns, and lots of other things. And we're also interested in taking a look at if the plague had come, say, later or earlier in European history, would it have been as devastating? There had been a major plague in, for example, Justinian's Constantinople back in the 6th century. This is another one that passes through. It has a huge wave of activity. It is uneven in how it impacts various places of Europe, but one thing it does do is it's going to transform the economy and the society of Europe. We're going to take a look at that as we go. Be sure to read closely about this in the text that you're using, and then, of course, look for any sample questions that can help you understand this area.